about everything you can do that's artistic. He's done it, and it's out there in the lobby. So now for something completely different. This is a story I wrote a few weeks ago for a reading series I'm part of. The theme for the night that I did it was Fractured Fairy Tales. This is called Fractured. The late day sun crept through the blinds, and the room looked like nothing had happened. Ella felt a flutter of panic creep in from her chest into her throat. She was sitting on the couch. Had she been asleep? Was she still? Ella could hear her blood rushing in her ears, and she could feel the edges of her vision start to blur. She squeezed her eyes shut so tightly that she could see the little squiggles of remembered light dancing behind her eyelids like a virus under a microscope. She steadied her breathing. She felt her pulse slow. Ella opened her eyes and looked around the room. The walls were painted a smooth, pale gray that softened the light of the room. The flat screen and the TV, the bookshelves, they had a fine covering of dust. The knickknacks all looked to be in their proper places. The kitchen looked freshly wiped down except for the plate and a set of silverware in the sink. Magnets covered the refrigerator door. This appeared to be her grandmother's cabin. None of this made any sense. Ella grabbed her hoodie off the back of the couch, a comfortably faded Red Sox zip-up that long ago an ex-boyfriend had left behind. Her hands reached for the knob on the front door when someone on the other side knocked. She yanked her hand back as if she had just touched a hot burner on the stove. Someone knocked again. Several friendly raps, musical, bum 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 bum, bum bum. She let the silence hang for a minute. Sweat pooled along her hairline. No further knocks came. "Who's there?" Ella asked. Her voice cracked slightly. She hated it when it did that. "Trevor." She didn't know who Trevor was. Did her grandmother? Her eyes drifted to the closed bedroom door. "Are you going to leave me standing out here?" Trevor gently prodded. Ella latched the chain on the door and unlocked the deadbolt. With a sharp click, she turned the knob and opened the door a crack. She wished that the door had a peephole like apartments in the city, or even a tiny window. Kind-looking blue eyes peered at her through the crack. They were nestled in a sharp, handsome face. Trevor looked to be about 40, with short blonde hair cut to flatter his gently receding hairline. Something about him was familiar, but she didn't know why. "See, Ella, it's me," he said. He grinned sheepishly. "Won't you let me inside?" Ella closed the door, unlatched the chain, and reopened the door fully. Trevor entered the room as if he'd been there before. Ella saw his eyes dart to the bedroom door before he walked across the room to the kitchen. He pulled a tea kettle from one of the lower cupboards, filled it with water from the tap, and put it on the stove. They stood in silence as the water was heated. The rushing turned into a rumble in the kettle. She closed the door and locked the deadbolt. Ella walked into the kitchen and sat at one of the stools by the kitchen island. Trevor opened a cupboard over the counter and retrieved 2 mugs and a small tin box. He pulled out 2 tea bags from the tin box and placed them in the mugs just as the rumbling sound accelerated into a whistle. Trevor pulled the kettle from the stove and poured the water into the cups as the rumbling slowed. He placed one of the mugs in front of Ella and sat on a stool opposite her. "I don't know you," she said. "You don't?" he replied. She couldn't tell if it was a statement or a question. "Why would I?" she asked. "Why are we here, Ella?" Trevor volleyed back. "I don't know," she replied, curling into herself a little. "It's not..." He let her sentence, unfinished, hang in the air. He pulled on the tea bag string in his mug, bobbing it in the cup gently. He brought the cup to his lips and took a hesitant trial sip, testing the water. "It's not what?" he asked. "Possible," she finished. "Why is that?" "Are you my doctor?" Ella asked. "Why do you think that?" Ella didn't respond. She looked at the bedroom door. "Why would you think I was your doctor?" Trevor asked again. "Something in your voice? The way you keep prying, asking your questions? It's like you're hunting for me to say something." Ella closed her eyes. "I burned this place to the ground. This place doesn't exist anymore. And yet you keep looking at that door." Behind her eyes, she could see splashes of red everywhere dripping, spraying, so vibrant, so vivid. She opened her eyes. "I just want you to tell me what happened," Trevor said. "How did you do this?" she asked. "Recreate this place from photos." "Why?" "To answer that question," he said. Trevor opened a drawer on the island and removed a manila folder thick with paper. He walked over to the bedroom door and placed a hand on it. "What really happened here?" Trevor asked. You had me sedated, she said. For how long? You were sedated after the officers found you. You were incoherent. You tried to hurt yourself. And you decided to put me in a room that looked like her cabin? We needed to know what happened, he replied, flipping through some pages in the file. Flashes of memory came back as the drugs they gave her continued to wear off. The officers found her on the side of the road, her clothes torn, covered in blood. They asked her where she had been, where she had come from, if she was all right. She didn't say much. She said, my grandmother. One of the officers stayed with her as the others went to investigate, to find the place she had been assaulted. It took them a while to find the smoldering remains. The nearly mile-long stretch of woods had long ago been allowed to reclaim the paths to the house. They parked their cars in a dirt road through a thicket of trees on the other side of the house, near perfect isolation. The officer returned, his face gray. She could still smell the vomit on his breath. I told them what happened, Ella said. A wolf didn't start the fire, Trevor said. She picked up the mug. It was warm in her hands, hot. She could hear the blood rushing in her ears like the rumbling in the tea kettle. Ella, if someone is still out there, if. There was a wolf. There was no wolf, Ella. Trevor stood over her. His shadow engulfed hers. Help us, help me understand. Your grandmother was torn apart. We know that much. But after that fire, I told you what had happened. We couldn't find evidence of a weapon, Trevor said. We did find a door in the floor to a basement, Ella. We couldn't find evidence of anyone else having been there. But you. She was trying to help me, Ella said. And then what? Was this someone coming to harm you? His voice was firm with her, full of authority, but still possessing some of the warmth from before. She could feel her pulse quicken, her breath a little shorter, her chest tightening. I'm trying to help you, Ella. She was trying to help me. And what happened? I wish you had kept me sedated, she whispered. She leaned forward over the island, her whole body stiffening. She could feel the hair on her arms bristling, coarsening. Why is that, Ella? His voice sounded so distant. His lips were still moving. He was still talking to her, but she couldn't hear him anymore. The mug cracked and then shattered, spilling hot liquid over the island. The pool rushed forward like water escaping from a dam. She strained against her vocal cords to say one last thing before her world ran red again. You were wrong about the wolf. Thank you.